right, welcome to the first of a four-part exploration of moving from where we discussed you may be, which is that business is chaotic, your people don't seem to be very good, in inverted commas, their processes, the way they work is poor, this leaves you frustrated, stressed, and ultimately with poor results, which means more stress for you, more difficulties home, less money, you can't go on holidays, your wife or your husband or your partner is unhappy with you. They're like, when are you going to make some damn money? You put all this effort in, you're stressed out of your brain, and yet there is very limited amounts of results to show for it. They're like, what is going, why don't you stop doing this and go get a job? At least we'd get paid. And then we opened up to a reality where you see that systems create results. Your results are not a mystery. They are from a system that has been executed. And you might say, well, that's not true, Tom. That's not true. I have systems and I'm not getting results. Well, I would invite you to look at your systems with two questions. One, are they being executed? So is there variable execution? And secondly, are they documented? You know, if they're not documented and they're not being executed, you are going to either get no results or poor results, which are a result. And you can use that because that result that you get is a result of your current system. And when you see this, you're like, oh, wow, if I change the system to create the result that I want, then suddenly your life opens up. Your business becomes consistent. Your people transform. They literally transform from being poor to consistent themselves. They're like, hey, this is fun. This is awesome. I'm enjoying work. A lot of your leadership problems and your workplace distress, the arguments and the difficulties that you experience in running your team that leads to poor productivity go away because you got the systems mindset. Your processes themselves documented, updated, clear, that you can take someone from day one, you'll hire and suddenly they're operational. Sure, they might not be elite, but their work will be consistent. Why? Because your processes are documented and they give the results that you need. And the ultimate outcome of this, number one, profits. You get to reap the rewards that you took on as the entrepreneur. Like, do not underestimate how powerful the entrepreneurial journey is. Unfortunately, most of the time it ends up in disaster. This is clearly documented in this book, this classic book, The E-Myth Revisited. And it was actually the E-Myth 25 years before this. So what are you going to do? Well, I said we're going to cover the first of four. The first thing that I want you to consider is that you must establish where you are. You must get an idea of where you are right now. Like, if you want to make this journey from business is chaotic through to business is consistent, and that you have realized that systems create your results, then the first thing you must do is establish where you are. It's kind of like Google Maps. You know, like it is a lot like Google Maps. You might say, I want to go to San Francisco. You're like, man, I want to go and see San Francisco. You want to see the cable cars. If you haven't seen the cable cars are pretty cool. Like, it's not something that you want to do every day, but just the sheer brilliance of this system to get around the town, it's pretty cool. You know, like you're like, okay, I want to go to San Francisco. Yes, there might be tents and drugs and poo on the street, but you know, for whatever reason, you're like, you know what, let's get the nice hotel. Let's stay in the nice area before California just falls in a heap. I want to see San Francisco. So you go, yep, let's go to San Francisco. But the problem is you don't know where you are. And so Google Maps will say, how do you want to get there? And you can type in New York, you can type in New Orleans, you can type in Denver. But if you're not in any of those places, the route that it gives you is not going to be the right route. There's this wonderful button called Your Location. Click Your Location and then the GPS thing activates and suddenly it shows you, and it will do that cool thing where it locks in on your location. And now it knows where you are. It has established where you are. And now You can say, I want to go to San Francisco. You can say, I want to go to Vancouver. You can say, I want to go to Mexico City, and suddenly it will open up those driving directions. But you must know where you are. You must establish where you are. So let's break this down a little bit deeper. You're like, oh, okay, cool. If I want to make the journey, then I need to know where I am. Well, first of all, I want you to think about what needs to be done. And your business has a bunch of stuff that needs to be done. Most businesses will have a requirement for marketing and sales and advertising and fulfillment. You know, this is the game of business. And yes, then there's a bunch of back end stuff. There's tax games and accounting and funding and VC and all that stuff. But at the very beginning, if your business cannot do those four, marketing, sales, advertising, and fulfillment, you're going to struggle. So let's say that you're like, okay, what needs to be done? And right now you might break that down a little bit more and go, oh, hang on, what is working? Out of those things that need to be done, what's working? And you might say, man, we got a great sales funnel. Awesome. Okay, I invite you to think how you got that, because that means you probably have marketing on point, probably, unless you got lucky, and maybe you did, that's cool. But somehow you developed a sales funnel. And then you look and you go, man, my advertising is not working. I read the book, Traffic Funnels, but you don't have your Dream 100. You don't have your daily Facebook Live. You don't have your expansion of content. You do have a little bit of SEO going on perhaps, but that establishes that that's not working. And perhaps then you turn to your fulfillment and you're like, oh man, my fulfillment's okay. We're kind of doing it okay, but it could definitely be improved. But all of this is establishing what needs to be done. And then out of that total package, what is working right now and what needs to be working. Next up, you've got who. Who's doing this work? Let me open up the idea that you can have the most wonderful systems business. You can have the most wonderful documentation of your processes. But if you don't have any people to do this work, or they are incompetent, or they are distracted, then the work won't get done. So you need someone to do the work. The who, that might be you. That might be your team. That might be somebody else's business that's doing that work. But who is doing the work? So we've got what, we've got who, we've got when. When do these things need to be deployed? When do these systems need to be deployed? Some of them will be on demand. Like something happens, there's a trigger, and then that triggers the requirement for a system to be executed. There's a new lead, there's a new webinar that's done, there's a new client fulfillment experience that happens. And then some of them will be scheduled. Some of them will be recurring, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. How are those going to get triggered? So you've got to think about when. So we've got what, we've got who, we've got when, and finally the how. Like, how does this work get done? How does a system get executed? And you might look and go, man, we got nothing. We're really chaotic at the moment. First of all, we don't know what we should be doing. We don't know who should be doing it. We don't know when it should be done, and we don't know how to do it. We're like, okay, at least you have established where you are. You're like, man, we are out the back of New Mexico somewhere in the desert, kind of lost. I'm like, great, you're not lost anymore. At least you know where you are. And you're like, man, I want to live at the beach. I'm going to head for Orange County. I'm like, I know that those taxes in California are pretty damn high, but stuff it. I'm choosing to live there. You're like, great. Okay, let's plug it in. And suddenly out of that mess, you can see what you need to do. You need to see who will have to be on your team or who needs to be deployed to do that work. You can work out when it needs to be done, and finally, you can document how it gets done. So finally, you are transitioning out of that business is chaotic, business is stressful, business is disappointing, business is frustrating, business is infuriating, through to business is consistent, business is fun. Your systems create your results, and you begin to expand into the entrepreneur that you saw all those months or years ago, perhaps even decades. You're like, finally, I'm getting this. Finally, I'm getting this. All right. In summary, establish where you are, what needs to be done, who's going to do it, when does it need to be done, and how's it going to get done. Join me tomorrow as we jump into the second part of making this journey between businesses chaotic through to businesses consistent. I look forward to seeing you then.